When we look at the lives of some women, it is easy to wonder why they seem to stand apart from what society expects of them. We notice them living alone, without a boyfriend, without a partner, sometimes not even appearing to be searching for one, and our conditioned minds immediately try to interpret this through familiar lenses: loneliness, lack of options, heartbreak, or disillusionment. But if we pause for a moment, we realize that the answer does not sit comfortably within any of these categories. Instead, it points to something more unsettling, something that shakes the foundations of everything we have been taught about what a woman should want, should need, should pursue. It points to an act of quiet rebellion, one that does not wave banners or shout slogans, but that carries within it a radical kind of power: the decision to choose herself over the scripts written for her. When a woman decides to live alone, she is not drifting into isolation. She is walking into herself. She is not rejecting connection, but rejecting the illusions of connection that ask her to shrink in order to belong. She is not exiled from love. She is redefining love from the inside out. The world often sees solitude as a problem to be solved, as a gap that must be filled, as proof of incompleteness. Yet when a woman chooses solitude consciously, it becomes a sanctuary. It becomes a space where she can strip off the layers of expectation and performance, where she no longer has to present herself as charming, agreeable, or endlessly available. This choice unsettles people because it removes her from the economy of validation. She no longer exchanges her worth for approval. She no longer negotiates her identity to maintain relationships that do not honor her. That kind of independence frightens people because it reveals how much of what we call love is built on control, on dependency, on fear of being alone. When a woman steps outside of that system, she becomes proof that another way is possible, and that possibility threatens the very logic that keeps so many bound. This is why people are quick to label her. They call her cold, arrogant, too picky, distant, damaged. These labels are not descriptions, they are defenses. They are ways of protecting themselves from the discomfort of what she represents. For her presence alone dismantles the myth that a woman needs to be chosen in order to matter. It dismantles the illusion that fulfillment is found only in the arms of another. It dismantles the comforting belief that if a woman is alone, it must be because she failed. In truth, her solitude is not failure, but sovereignty. She has chosen to value her inner world over the noise of external validation, to prioritize authenticity over convention, and to remain loyal to herself even if the world cannot understand her choices. When she walks alone, she is not empty. She is full of her own presence. Her silence is not absence. It is a kind of strength that grows in the spaces most people avoid. There is something profoundly unsettling about a woman who does not beg for attention, who does not compromise her boundaries to avoid loneliness, who does not mold herself into whatever shape is needed to please others. This kind of woman reveals a truth many would rather not face, that wholeness cannot be given from the outside. It must be cultivated within. The danger she represents is not that she rejects love, but that she redefines it in a way that demands maturity, depth, and reciprocity. Most people are not prepared to meet that standard, and so it is easier to criticize her than to rise to her level. Her choice is not born of bitterness. It is born of clarity. She has known what it feels like to pour herself into others who could not hold her. She has known the exhaustion of burning brightly for those who never wanted to feel the warmth. She has lived through the disillusionment of giving too much and receiving too little. Each disappointment became a teacher, each heartbreak a mirror, until she finally realized that love that asks her to diminish herself is not love at all. That realization did not make her colder, it made her stronger. It gave her the courage to stop chasing illusions and start standing firmly in her truth. That truth is simple but difficult. She would rather be alone than be half alive in the wrong relationship. There is something magnetic about this kind of authenticity. It draws admiration from those who recognize their own longing for freedom, and it provokes fear in those who are still trapped in dependency. Men who thrive on female insecurity feel unsteady around her because they cannot manipulate what does not seek their approval. Women who still measure their worth by whether they are chosen feel judged by her presence, as though her independence exposes their hidden doubts. But she is not living to confront or shame anyone. She is simply being herself, and in that act of being, she becomes a mirror that shows others what they have denied in themselves. Carl Jung said that what we deny becomes our shadow, and this woman, by living her truth, becomes a reflection of the shadow others are unwilling to face. She is the embodiment of the freedom they dream of, but fear to claim. To walk alone in this way requires a kind of courage that is often misunderstood. It is not the absence of longing for love, companionship, or intimacy. She still desires these things, but not at the expense of her soul. She has learned that love without authenticity is a cage, that companionship without reciprocity is loneliness in disguise, and that intimacy without respect is just another form of erasure. So she waits, not with bitterness, but with discernment. She does not close her heart, but she refuses to let just anyone enter. This patience is mistaken for arrogance, but it is really integrity. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows her value and refuses to barter it for crumbs. This choice is revolutionary because it changes the story we tell about women. The traditional narrative insists that a woman alone is incomplete, that her worth is measured by whether she is wanted, that her happiness depends on someone else choosing her. But this woman writes a different story. In her story, solitude is not a curse but a resource, not a sign of failure but a path to wholeness. In her story, love is not about rescue but about recognition, not about dependency but about presence. In her story, she is not waiting to be completed, but living already complete, open only to those who can meet her as an equal. Her life becomes a quiet contradiction to everything we have been told. She does not rush into relationships to escape silence. She embraces silence as her teacher. She does not accept less than she deserves to avoid loneliness. She allows loneliness to refine her standards. She does not diminish her light to keep others comfortable. She learns to shine in her full presence, whether or not anyone is watching. This unsettles people because it exposes how often we settle for less, how often we accept distraction in place of depth, how often we confuse validation with love. Her choice calls us to reflect on our own compromises, and not everyone is ready to face that mirror. But she keeps walking, not because she is trying to prove something, not because she thinks she is better than others, but because she has found a deeper rhythm. She has learned that wholeness is not given, it is claimed. She has realized that solitude is not a punishment, but a space of becoming. She has discovered that when you no longer beg for love, the love that comes is the kind that does not demand your surrender. And so she stands firm in her silence, radiant in her presence, unsettling in her freedom, walking not away from life, but toward a life where she belongs fully to herself. First, Carl Jung once said that everything we deny in ourselves becomes part of our shadow. And when a woman chooses to be alone, she often finds herself standing face to face with that shadow. Solitude is not just empty space or the absence of others. It is a mirror that reflects back everything we have tried to ignore. For many women who step into this kind of silence, the journey inward begins not as a choice, but as an inevitability. At some point, the external noise stops satisfying the old distractions lose their pull, and what is left is the raw landscape of the self. In that landscape, ghosts rise: childhood wounds, unspoken fears, memories of abandonment, attachments mistaken for love. These are not pleasant companions, but they are necessary ones, because without confronting them, there can be no true freedom. The woman who chooses solitude does not begin this journey because she is incapable of being loved or because she has given up on love. Rather, she begins it because she has seen what happens when unhealed wounds dictate her choices. She has lived the cycles of giving too much, of begging for scraps of attention, of mistaking control for intimacy. She has felt the hollow aftermath of relationships that consumed her energy without ever nourishing her soul. At some point, the pain stopped being simply pain and became a teacher. It no longer cut her down, it shaped her awareness. She started to recognize patterns, the way she would lose herself in the chase for approval, the way she would settle for less than she deserved because silence felt unbearable, the way she confused possession with love. Slowly, she began to see that the common denominator was not the people she chose, but the wounds she had not yet faced. So solitude became her crucible. Alone, without the distractions of someone else's presence, she could finally turn her gaze inward. This is where Jung's shadow work comes alive, not in books or theories, but in the lived experience of sitting with oneself. In the stillness of solitude, memories surface that she had long buried: the father who was present physically but absent emotionally; the mother who taught her that sacrifice was the price of being loved; the friendships that demanded compliance but never offered true support; the lovers who mistook her vulnerability for weakness. All of it comes back not to haunt, but to be integrated. Because what is denied never disappears, it only hides, waiting for the silence to draw it out. The process is painful. Facing the shadow always is. It requires a kind of honesty that the world rarely teaches us to practice. To admit that we stayed too long in relationships that diminished us. To admit that we believed lies because the truth seemed lonelier. To admit that much of what we called love was really fear disguised. In solitude, she cannot escape these admissions. But instead of destroying her, they begin to free her. For every shadow faced is one less chain unconsciously binding her. For every wound acknowledged is one less pattern dictating her choices. Slowly, painfully, she begins to understand that solitude is not emptiness, but space, and in that space, she can finally see herself clearly. This is why her solitude feels different from isolation. Isolation is born of fear, of hiding from connection, of withdrawing out of bitterness or mistrust. But solitude, when chosen consciously, becomes preservation. It becomes a sacred container where healing can unfold. The woman in solitude is not hiding from the world. She is protecting herself from losing herself again. She is not avoiding love. She is preparing for a kind of love that requires both partners to have done their own inner work. She is not closing herself off. She is pruning away what no longer serves so that when new growth comes, it will not be strangled by old patterns. Through this process, disappointment transforms into wisdom. She remembers the times when she begged for crumbs and realizes that the problem was not that she wanted too much, but that she settled for too little. She recalls the moments she silenced her own needs to keep someone else comfortable and sees now that love which demands silence is not love, but control. She recognizes how many times she mistook intensity for intimacy, chaos for passion, and she begins to see how those choices mirrored the unhealed parts of herself. Each realization hurts, but each one also brings her closer to clarity. Emotional maturity is not a gift handed down, it is earned in the fire of these recognitions. And so her solitude, though often heavy, is also the space where she becomes whole. The woman who emerges from this inner work does not carry the same hunger she once did. She is no longer starving for attention because she has learned to nourish herself. She is no longer desperate for validation because she has begun to validate her own worth. This shift confuses others because they mistake the absence of need for the absence of desire. But she still desires love, intimacy, connection, only now she desires them without desperation. She no longer accepts illusions in place of reality. She is no longer swayed by promises or by grand gestures. She looks instead for presence, for truth, for reciprocity. This is why many find her intimidating. She is not difficult, but she will not settle. She has done the hard work of sitting with her own shadow, and she expects others to do the same. Her solitude, then, is not rejection, but refinement. It is the alchemy by which pain becomes clarity. And though others may see her as distant, what they are really seeing is discernment. She is not closing her heart, but filtering with care. Her intuition, sharpened in silence, can sense when someone lacks depth, when someone approaches her with performance rather than presence. She has lived enough to know the difference, and she no longer hesitates to walk away. To many, this looks like coldness, but in truth, it is self-respect. It is the quiet strength of someone who has finally stopped betraying herself in the name of belonging. The shadow work of solitude also awakens something ancient in her. Beneath the personal wounds lies a collective story, one that women have carried for generations. The pressure to be chosen, to serve, to shrink, to make themselves desirable even at the cost of their own essence. In her solitude, she begins to see how these ancestral patterns have shaped her, how she has inherited not just her own wounds, but the wounds of those before her. And in choosing not to repeat the cycle, by refusing to accept love that diminishes, she is not just healing herself, but breaking chains that have bound countless women. This awareness deepens her solitude into something archetypal. She is no longer just a woman alone. She is a woman standing at the edge of an old script, rewriting it with every choice she makes. The irony is that what the world calls absence is actually her deepest presence. What looks like withdrawal is actually her awakening. What seems like coldness is actually her clarity. The more she faces the shadows within, the more she integrates them, the more whole she becomes. And in that wholeness, she discovers a new kind of freedom, not the freedom from love, but the freedom from needing to lose herself in order to be loved. There comes a point when the woman who has walked through silence and faced her shadows begins to notice a new current moving within her, one that feels unfamiliar yet deeply natural. It is the slow, steady rise of inner strength, not the kind of strength defined by hardness or defense, but a softer and more resilient power that grows from alignment with herself. She begins to see that her solitude has not been a void, but a gestation, that all the time spent unraveling patterns and healing wounds has quietly been building a foundation for something larger. The silence that once felt heavy now becomes a companion, and in that companionship, she feels her own energy expand in ways she never thought possible. Instead of looking outward to measure her worth, she begins to sense the vastness of her inner world, and this recognition shifts how she moves, how she speaks, and even how she loves. This inner strength does not announce itself with drama. It does not need to prove itself through dominance or control. It shows itself in the way she no longer compromises her values to be accepted. It shows itself in the calmness she carries when others attempt to provoke or diminish her. It shows itself in the way she chooses stillness instead of reaction, in the way her presence itself becomes grounding. People notice it without always understanding it. They feel steadier around her, though they may not know why. This is the nature of true strength. It radiates rather than imposes. And because she has built it in solitude, brick by brick, It cannot be easily shaken. What once would have pulled her into chaos now meets a quiet firmness, an unspoken boundary that protects her without her needing to explain herself. With this new power comes a deeper relationship to intuition. Where once she doubted herself, second, guessed her instincts, or allowed others to define her reality, now she trusts the signals that arise from within. She can feel when something is aligned and when it is not. She can sense when someone's words are empty, no matter how sweetly spoken, because her body remembers the truth even when her mind wants to deny it. Intuition becomes her compass, sharpened by the solitude that forced her to listen when no one else was speaking. This inner guidance makes her less dependent on external validation. She no longer asks others who she is or what she should do because she has learned to hear her own voice, and it is clearer than any approval or criticism could ever be. The woman who has grown through solitude also discovers a new relationship with vulnerability. In the past, vulnerability might have felt like danger, like exposing herself only to be hurt, dismissed, or misunderstood. But now she sees that vulnerability is not weakness, but authenticity. To be vulnerable is not to abandon boundaries, but to show up as she truly is, without armor, without masks, without performing for acceptance. Her solitude has given her the courage to know that even if her openness is not always received, she will not be destroyed by rejection. This changes how she connects with others because she no longer approaches from a place of desperation, but from fullness. Vulnerability becomes a gift she chooses to offer, not a gamble she fears will leave her broken. There is also a redefinition of love that emerges from this transformation. Before solitude, love may have been confused with intensity, with pursuit, with the thrill of being wanted or the comfort of being needed. But now love begins to look like something different. It looks like reciprocity, where giving and receiving flow in balance. It looks like presence, where words are matched by actions and attention is given without distraction. It looks like freedom, where both partners can grow without fear of abandonment or control. She recognizes now that real love is not about filling emptiness, but about expanding wholeness. And because she has cultivated her own wholeness in solitude, she no longer seeks love to complete her, but to share what she already is. Others may find this shift difficult to understand. Some may accuse her of being too guarded, too independent, too unwilling to compromise. But what they often fail to see is that she has simply raised her standards, not in a superficial sense, but in an energetic one. She no longer entertains connections that drain her spirit. She no longer tolerates conversations that belittle her intelligence or relationships that require her to shrink. She has experienced enough of the cost of self-abandonment to know that no companionship is worth losing herself again. This boundary may keep many at a distance, but it also makes space for connections that are genuine, grounded, and transformative. She would rather wait in her solitude than settle for illusions. As she continues to walk this path, she begins to realize that her personal transformation also connects to something larger. The strength she has cultivated is not only for herself, but also for others who are watching quietly, perhaps struggling with their own shadows. When she speaks, her words carry weight because they are rooted in lived experience, not theory. When she holds space for someone else's pain, she does so without judgment because she knows what it means to sit in the fire and not run away. In this way, her solitude becomes not just healing for herself, but medicine for others. She becomes an anchor in her community, a quiet example of what it means to live from self-respect and integrity. And yet, she remains aware that this journey has no final destination. Inner strength is not something achieved once and for all. It is a practice, a daily alignment with truth. There are still moments when old wounds whisper, when fear tries to return, when the shadow beckons. But now she meets those moments differently. Instead of resisting, she embraces them as reminders of her humanity. Instead of collapsing, she allows them to refine her further. Each time she chooses awareness over reaction, patience over haste, authenticity over performance. She strengthens the roots she has planted in solitude. These roots make her unshakable, not because storms will never come, but because she no longer fears their arrival. In this way, the solitude that once seemed like emptiness has become her ground, her sanctuary, her teacher. It has taught her how to sit with discomfort without running, how to listen to her own voice without distortion, how to hold her own heart without demanding that someone else carry it for her. It has given her a kind of sovereignty that is not about ruling over others, but about ruling within. And from this sovereignty flows a quiet magnetism. She no longer chases, she attracts. She no longer pleads, she invites. She no longer fears being alone. She chooses connection only when it honors both herself and the other. When a woman has walked through solitude long enough to embrace her shadows, cultivate her strength, and redefine her relationship with herself, something subtle but powerful begins to happen in the way she moves through the world. The energy she carries shifts, not because she consciously tries to project anything, but because alignment with herself naturally radiates outward. People begin to sense it without her saying a word. It is in the steadiness of her gaze, in the way her presence fills a room without demanding attention, in the quiet assurance of her voice. This energy is not the result of striving, but of authenticity. She is no longer wearing masks, no longer bending to fit into roles, no longer negotiating her value. The energy that comes from such clarity cannot be faked, and it cannot be ignored because it speaks to something universal that others instinctively recognize. What confuses many is that her energy does not resemble the performance of confidence so often celebrated in the world. It is not loud, not forceful, not attention-seeking. Rather, it is calm and magnetic, like the stillness of water that reflects everything around it. Those who encounter her often feel more themselves in her presence because her authenticity invites their own. And yet, this very energy can also unsettle because it confronts people with the parts of themselves they have not yet acknowledged. When someone has not faced their own shadows, they may feel exposed in her clarity. They may misinterpret her discernment as judgment, her boundaries as rejection, her independence as coldness. But those who are ready for authenticity find her energy deeply nourishing, like a reminder of what it feels like to live aligned with truth. This energetic presence also begins to transform how she relates to intimacy. In the past, intimacy might have been fueled by need or by the longing to be chosen, but now intimacy becomes an exchange of energy rather than a transaction of validation. She no longer seeks closeness as a way to avoid loneliness. She seeks it as a way to expand connection. The partners or friends she allows close to her are those who resonate with her frequency, those who are also walking their own path of awareness. This does not mean they are perfect or fully healed, but it means they are willing to face themselves, to grow, to be real. Because she knows what it costs to be entangled with someone who is not self-aware, she does not compromise on this anymore. Her solitude has taught her patience, and patience becomes her filter. She would rather wait for alignment than settle for convenience. With this shift, her very definition of attraction changes. Where once she might have been drawn to intensity, charm, or promises, now she feels drawn to consistency, groundedness, and presence. The qualities that stir her are not flashy but steady. She notices how someone listens, how they hold space in conversation, how they handle frustration, how they honor their own integrity. The surface matters far less than the substance, because her intuition has been sharpened by silence. And because she has cultivated a deep relationship with herself, she is no longer blinded by superficial gestures. She can discern between love that expands her and love that would diminish her, and she honors that discernment even if it means walking away. This new energetic presence also changes how she is perceived socially. Some may admire her, seeing her as a model of strength and authenticity. Others may feel threatened because her very existence disrupts unspoken agreements about how women are supposed to behave: compliant, accommodating, eager to please. She no longer plays by those rules, and that defiance, even when quiet, challenges those who benefit from them. As a result, she may find that her circle grows smaller, but it also grows truer. The relationships that remain are those that respect her boundaries and celebrate her presence without trying to mold her. And while this sometimes means standing apart from the majority, it also deepens her sense of freedom because she knows she no longer has to trade her essence for acceptance. Another dimension of this energetic shift is her relationship with purpose. In solitude, she not only healed her heart, but also began to hear the whispers of what her life is truly meant to express. Many women, when entangled in the noise of external demands, lose sight of their own callings. But when she removed those distractions, she began to remember what stirs her spirit, whether it is art, writing, teaching, healing, creating, or leading. She realizes that her energy is not just for herself, but is meant to flow outward in ways that contribute to the world. And because she is no longer motivated by fear or approval, her purpose becomes clearer. She does not seek to prove anything through her work. She seeks to embody alignment. Her energy in this sense becomes not just magnetic, but creative, shaping the reality around her through intention and integrity. This transformation also deepens her spiritual awareness. Solitude, shadow work, and inner strength inevitably lead her closer to mystery, to the unseen forces that guide life. She may not follow a specific path or tradition, but she begins to feel the interconnectedness of all things. She senses how her energy affects others, how her choices ripple outward, how her healing contributes to collective healing. This awareness humbles her and empowers her at the same time. She sees herself as part of something larger, and this perspective dissolves much of the fear that once controlled her. Death, loss, change, these no longer terrify her in the same way because she has already experienced many deaths of the self in her solitude. She knows now that endings are gateways, that every release makes space for renewal. The magnetism she carries is not something she cultivates deliberately, but something that arises naturally from living in truth. This magnetism is not about beauty, status, or charm, though it may be expressed through them. It is about alignment, about the coherence between her inner world and outer expression. People feel safe around her not because she offers constant comfort, but because she embodies honesty. They trust her not because she tells them what they want to hear, but because they sense she is rooted in something deeper than appearances. And though this magnetism draws people, she remains discerning. She does not allow everyone into her inner world because she knows the value of her energy. She has learned that not everyone who is drawn to her deserves her presence, and so she filters carefully, giving generously where there is reciprocity and withdrawing gracefully where there is not over time. This energetic presence shapes her destiny in ways she could not have predicted when she first entered solitude. Doors open not because she forces them, but because her authenticity aligns her with opportunities that resonate with who she truly is. Relationships form that mirror her growth rather than her wounds. Challenges arise, but she meets them with resilience instead of fear. She no longer tries to control outcomes as she once did because she has come to trust the rhythm of life. Her solitude has taught her that everything unfolds in its time, and this trust gives her a sense of ease even amid uncertainty. It is not that she never feels doubt or pain, but that she carries within her the memory of having survived herself, and that memory sustains her through everything that follows. When a woman has come this far, when she has walked through solitude, integrated her shadows, embraced her strength, and embodied an energy that is both magnetic and grounded, she steps into a space that feels like true sovereignty. Sovereignty is not isolation, nor is it detachment from the world. It is the full recognition and embodiment of her own authority over herself. She no longer waits for permission to exist as she is. She no longer seeks validation to confirm her worth. She no longer negotiates the truth of her soul for the comfort of others. Sovereignty is the natural outcome of having faced everything within herself that once held her captive, and it becomes the state from which she now lives and breathes. This sovereignty changes how she makes choices. Before, choices may have been reactive, shaped by fear, by longing, or by the expectations of others. Now her choices are rooted in alignment, guided by the compass of intuition and clarity. She no longer feels pressured to move at the world's pace, to conform to its definitions of success, or to prove herself through external measures. She chooses relationships not based on who offers the most attention, but on who resonates with her essence. She chooses work not based on status, but on whether it expands her spirit. She chooses her words not to appease, but to express what is true. In every decision, her sovereignty whispers through her actions, reminding her that the life she builds is her own, and she alone is responsible for its integrity. With sovereignty also comes a new relationship to boundaries. She does not set boundaries out of fear or defensiveness, but out of self-respect. Her boundaries are no longer rigid walls, but living membranes that allow love and connection to flow while filtering out what diminishes her. She understands that boundaries are not punishments, but acts of preservation, and by holding them firmly, she teaches others how to meet her with respect. People may resist her boundaries because they are accustomed to women who give endlessly, who sacrifice without question, who dissolve themselves in the name of belonging. But she has walked too far to return to that version of herself. Her sovereignty refuses to betray her essence, and so she holds her ground, not with anger, but with quiet certainty. Another aspect of sovereignty is her deepened relationship with time. She no longer feels the desperation of rushing, of needing everything to happen immediately, of fearing she is running out of opportunities. Solitude has taught her patience, and that patience allows her to flow with life instead of forcing it. She sees now that what is meant for her cannot be missed, and what is not meant for her cannot be forced. This understanding releases her from the anxiety of comparison and competition. She no longer measures her journey against that of others because she knows her path is uniquely hers. This timelessness infuses her presence with calm. Even when faced with uncertainty, she carries the unshakable knowing that everything unfolds as it should. And this knowing itself becomes a source of peace. Her sovereignty also transforms her relationship with love in its highest form. She no longer confuses love with possession or with dependence. She no longer seeks love as an escape from loneliness. Instead, love becomes an expansion of the wholeness she already embodies. She is open to partnership, but she does not need it to complete her. She is receptive to intimacy, but she does not abandon herself to maintain it. She can give deeply without losing her essence, and she can receive fully without fear of being indebted. This balanced love becomes a sacred exchange where both people honor not only their connection, but also their individuality. Sovereign love is not about merging into one, but about walking side by side, whole in themselves, yet stronger together. The woman who stands in sovereignty also begins to embody a new kind of leadership. This is not leadership defined by titles or authority over others, but leadership by example. People are drawn to her presence because it reflects authenticity, courage, and integrity. Without trying to, she becomes a mirror for others, showing them what it means to live free of self-betrayal. Her leadership does not demand followers, it inspires self-discovery. Those who encounter her often find themselves questioning where they have compromised their own truth, where they have hidden their own power. She becomes a catalyst not because she imposes change, but because she embodies it. And in doing so, she contributes to a larger ripple of transformation that extends far beyond her individual life. This sovereignty also reconnects her with her creativity. Creativity, once suppressed by the demands of survival or the weight of unhealed wounds, now flows more freely. She begins to express herself in ways that feel natural and joyful through art, words, movement, or any form that allows her essence to shine. Creativity for her is no longer about achievement or recognition. It is about alignment and expression. Each act of creation becomes an affirmation of her existence, a declaration that her presence in the world matters. And because her creativity arises from authenticity, it carries a resonance that touches others deeply, even if they cannot articulate why spiritual depth continues to unfold in this stage of her journey. Having embraced solitude and integrated her shadows, she now feels the sacredness in the ordinary. She sees meaning in the cycles of nature, in the rhythm of breath, in the quiet moments of reflection. She recognizes that sovereignty is not separation from life, but communion with it. She feels herself as part of something vast and mysterious, and this connection dissolves the illusion of control. Instead of resisting change, she learns to dance with it. Instead of fearing endings, she welcomes them as thresholds. Her spirituality is not about doctrines, but about lived experience, about feeling the pulse of the universe within her own heartbeat. As she deepens into sovereignty, she also becomes increasingly selective about where she invests her energy. She knows now that her energy is sacred, that it is not to be squandered on people or situations that drain her. She gives generously where she feels reciprocity, but she withdraws gracefully when she senses misalignment. She no longer feels guilty for protecting her energy because she understands that doing so allows her to live fully in her truth. This discernment may mean fewer connections, but it also means richer ones. She surrounds herself with those who honor her presence, who challenge her to grow without diminishing her essence, who meet her as equals rather than dependents. This sovereign state does not make her immune to pain, but it changes her relationship with it. When challenges arise, she no longer collapses under them, but meets them with resilience. She sees pain not as punishment, but as initiation, each trial deepening her wisdom and compassion. She knows now that suffering is not the enemy, but a teacher, and she accepts its lessons without letting it define her. Her sovereignty allows her to hold both joy and sorrow without being consumed by either. She has become spacious enough to contain contradictions, strong enough to endure uncertainty, and compassionate enough to embrace imperfection. Ultimately, her sovereignty is not about standing above others, but about standing fully in herself. It is about living with integrity, honoring her truth, and embodying the freedom she has earned through her journey. This sovereignty radiates outward, touching everyone she encounters, because when one woman claims her full presence, she silently gives permission for others to do the same. And so her life becomes more than just her own story. It becomes part of a larger movement, a testament to what is posse